Disrespect is an experience every human being encounters at some point. It comes in subtle forms, dismissive tones, backhanded compliments, withheld acknowledgement, or in overt ones, like public humiliation, betrayal, or abuse. And when it happens, the instinctive response is emotional. We want to react, we want to defend, to attack, to prove a point. But here's the difficult truth. Reacting emotionally to disrespect often reinforces exactly what the other person believes about you, that you are easily provoked, unstable, or seeking validation. That is precisely what they want, your energy. And when you give it to them, they win. Now, let's step back and think psychologically. Disrespect is fundamentally about power. It's a game of emotional leverage. The one who disrespects you is seeking to assert dominance, control, or superiority, whether consciously or unconsciously. They want to establish that you are beneath them in value, that your presence is secondary, your voice ignorable. When you react from a place of wounded ego or rage, you unconsciously accept the role they've written for you. You become predictable, and worse, you become easily manipulated. Detaching emotionally is not about apathy or indifference, it's about strategic restraint. It's about recognizing that your emotional energy is a finite resource, one that should not be poured into people who have demonstrated they cannot respect its value. When you detach, you reclaim authorship of your reactions. You remind yourself that your inner state is not dictated by external insults. You are not a slave to someone else's immaturity. This level of detachment requires strength, real, disciplined strength. It requires self-awareness and the ability to delay gratification, because there is a kind of gratification in exploding, in arguing, in unleashing your anger, but it is a short-term satisfaction. It doesn't elevate you. It doesn't teach them anything lasting. It keeps you on their level, and the moment you descend to their level, you reinforce the very dynamic they created, a power imbalance where they control your state. To detach is to reject the premise. You are no longer giving your energy to the insult. You are refusing to acknowledge the disrespect as valid currency in the economy of your self-worth. You become untouchable, not because you've hidden your pain, but because you've risen above the compulsion to perform it for them. Now, some might argue that silence is weakness, that not reacting means you let them get away with it. But let's challenge that idea. When you detach emotionally and hold your ground without engaging, you're not letting anything go. You're letting it collapse under its own weight. You're allowing the disrespect to reveal itself for what it is, a reflection of the other person's inadequacy, not yours, and in doing so, you remove yourself from the transaction entirely. You become unavailable for that dynamic. There's an ancient Stoic idea worth revisiting here. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion," and that's revolutionary in a world where everyone is trying to provoke one. The person who can walk away without explaining, without retaliating, without trying to convince anyone of their value, that person holds true power, because they've refused to play the game, and what's the result? The one who disrespected you begins to feel the void. They no longer have access to your reaction. They can't feed off your frustration. Your silence becomes a mirror in which they see themselves more clearly, and often uncomfortably. Disrespect thrives when it produces chaos. Starve it, and it begins to feel its own emptiness. This isn't about passive aggression or manipulation. It's about preserving your center. It's about refusing to internalize someone else's distorted perception of you. And most importantly, it's about channeling your energy into things that elevate you rather than into emotional wars that diminish you. Think of it like this: when someone disrespects you, they are handing you a piece of psychological garbage. You don't have to pick it up, you don't have to carry it, you can look at it, see it for what it is, and move on. That is not weakness, that is sovereignty. So the next time you feel that pull to react, to defend your honor, to clap back, to prove yourself, pause. Ask yourself, am I giving away my power just to win a moment I'll regret? Then ask yourself a better question: what happens if I don't engage at all? Your silence, when chosen consciously and held with inner strength, becomes the loudest statement in the room. Let them feel what they tried to give you, and let your calm be the reminder that their disrespect didn't reach where it was meant to. There's a certain kind of strength that never announces itself. It doesn't need to. It doesn't seek recognition, applause, or approval. That strength is built in private, through consistent effort, discipline, and silence. And here's the uncomfortable truth for most people. The best way to make someone regret disrespecting you isn't through confrontation or retaliation. It's through elevation, quiet, strategic, unshakable elevation. When you begin to evolve without broadcasting every step, something remarkable happens. You create tension, not the petty kind rooted in resentment, but a kind of psychological dissonance in those who once looked down on you. Why? Because they expected you to stay the same. They wanted the version of you they could ignore, belittle, dismiss. And now, without warning, without permission, you're no longer playing the role they assigned you. This is what makes private evolution so powerful. It disrupts narratives. It forces people to reevaluate who you are, and more importantly, who they are in relation to you. They may not say it. They may never admit it. But inside, where ego and pride wrestle for dominance, they feel it. They feel the space you've grown into, and often they feel their own inadequacy in the reflection of your silence. It's important to understand this. People are addicted to patterns. They treat others the way they've always treated them because it's easy, familiar, and emotionally efficient. Disrespect is often just a habit. When you begin to grow, when you become more composed, more focused, more capable, you interrupt that habit. You become unpredictable, and unpredictability is power. But the mistake most people make is trying to show that they've changed. They post it, preach it, or proclaim it in some attempt to prove themselves. That's not strength, that's still rooted in needing validation. True growth doesn't need to be proven. It reveals itself in time, in action, in presence, and the people who once disrespected you, they'll notice, not because you told them, but because they can no longer reach you where they used to. This isn't about ego, it's about priority. Your time, your energy, your emotional bandwidth, these are investments. When you invest them in drama, in revenge, in defending your worth, you rob yourself of progress. But when you take that same energy and pour it into your craft, your mind, your purpose, you begin to build something that outlasts every insult ever thrown at you, and that's the goal, not to react, but to rise. Now, there's a deeper psychological component at play here. When someone disrespects you, they are trying, consciously or not, to anchor you to a certain identity. Maybe it's the old version of yourself, maybe it's a diminished one, but it's always a label meant to control the narrative. When you respond emotionally, you reinforce that identity, but when you grow in silence, when you evolve in ways they can't predict or control, you disarm their projection, you become a new day, the point they don't know how to process. And for many, that's unsettling. People don't like when the assumptions they've built about others start to collapse. It forces them to confront their own limitations, their own failures to grow, their own insecurities. So yes, it might cause discomfort in them, but that discomfort isn't your problem. It's their teacher. Keep in mind, not everyone deserves a front row seat to your transformation. Some people only come alive in chaos. They thrive on the performance of conflict. That's why silence is so powerful. It denies them the stage. When you stop giving them access to your reaction, they're left alone with their own behavior, and often that's where the real regret begins. Not because you punished them, but because they finally had to sit with themselves. That's the move. You evolve without ceremony. You become so focused on your future that the past can't pull you back. You let your results speak for you, and the most poetic part of this process, by the time they realize what they lost, they no longer have the access they once abused. Your silence has already done the work. Your growth has already rendered their opinion irrelevant, so don't explain, don't announce, don't try to convince them of your worth. Build in silence, evolve privately. Let your elevation be the only response they never saw coming. And remember, your silence paired with progress is not emptiness, it's presence amplified. There's a truth that's hard to confront but impossible to deny. People don't value what they have constant access to, especially when they've already disrespected it. When someone shows you disregard, whether subtly or overtly, and you continue to offer them your presence, your attention, your energy, you're confirming their perception that you're expendable. Not intentionally, perhaps, but unconsciously, you are teaching them how to treat you. That's not arrogance, that's conditioning. Human behavior is largely responsive to what it can get away with, and if you allow access without requiring respect, you'll get presence without regard. Now let's look at this from a psychological perspective. Attention is energy, and energy is value. Your presence in someone's life is not neutral, it is an investment. Every conversation you stay in, every interaction you tolerate, every time you show up emotionally, mentally, or physically, you are giving away a part of yourself. The mistake most people make is assuming that the other person sees that as a gift. Often they don't, especially if you've already been disrespected. They see it as weakness or desperation, or worse, dependency. And people don't regret hurting someone they believe depends on them. They regret losing someone who didn't need them at all. That's why withdrawing your energy, calmly without drama, is so powerful, because it forces the other person to confront the absence they took for granted. It creates a void, a silence, a question they can't easily answer. Where did you go? Why did you stop responding? Why do you feel different now? And what's especially effective about this is that it's not an attack. It's not aggression, it's not petty or performative, it's simple, clean distance. You're not arguing, you're not trying to teach them a lesson with your words, you're letting the natural law of consequence do its job. And most of the time it does. People remember presence most acutely in its absence. That's when the mind starts to reflect, when the silence gets loud enough. But none of that can happen if you keep showing up where you're not valued. There's also a philosophical depth to this. To withdraw from someone who disrespected you is an act of self-honor. It says, I am no longer available for interactions that diminish my worth. I don't need to fight, beg, or prove anything. I simply remove myself, and in doing so, I reaffirm the boundary that should have never needed to be explained in the first place. But this isn't easy, especially if you're someone who's empathetic by nature, or if you've been conditioned to associate your value with being needed. You might feel guilt, you might question whether you're being too harsh, and that's when emotional discipline is crucial, because you have to understand, staying in situations where respect is absent doesn't make you noble. It makes you complicit in your own devaluation. You're not proving your worth by enduring mistreatment. You're allowing someone else to write the narrative of your identity, and that's a story that never ends well. People will often test your boundaries without even realizing it. They'll disrespect you subtly, maybe even unconsciously, just to see how far they can go, and your reaction, whether you confront, excuse, or continue engaging, teaches them what's allowed. But when you withdraw silently without warning, you break the pattern. You give them nothing to push against, and in that vacuum, they're forced to evaluate what your presence really meant. Sometimes they won't care. And that's useful information, because now you know your absence didn't register, and you're better off without someone who couldn't even feel the loss. But other times it hits them, maybe not immediately, but eventually. And when it does, they are left with the echo of everything they once overlooked. Your attention, your loyalty, your presence, your silence. This is why you don't have to explain your worth, you just remove it. Quietly, without resentment, without fanfare, you stop offering what they didn't respect, and you let them feel the weight of that choice. That's the move, that's how regret is born. Not through confrontation, but through absence. So the next time someone shows you disrespect, don't argue, don't plead, don't try to make them understand, just pull back, reclaim your time, your energy, your presence, let them feel what they thought they could live without. And remember, nothing reveals value like absence.